Resources and Living Things, Lesson 5, Biodiversity. Yes, we skipped Lesson 4. After this lesson, we'll be able to explain the value of biodiversity, identify the factors that affect biodiversity, and identify ways that human activity threatens and protects biodiversity. My Planet Diary blog, posted by Max from Hagerstown, Maryland. I went to summer camp to learn about wildlife and how to protect it. One of the activities that I liked the most was making bat boxes. These are wooden homes for brown bats, which often need places to nest. Making these houses is important because without brown bats, there would be too many mosquitoes. I hope the bats like their new homes as much as I loved making them. Our question says, how do you think helping the bats in an area helps other species nearby? Well, we know our circle of life. That if there's not enough bats to eat the bugs, then there's gonna be too many bugs. And then the animals that eat the bats aren't gonna have enough food. So they're gonna die out. And then we'll have nothing and too many bugs. What is biodiversity's value? No one knows exactly how many species live on Earth. As you can see in Figure 1, scientists have identified more than 1.6 million species so far. The number of different species in an area is called the area's biodiversity. It is difficult to estimate the total biodiversity of Earth because many areas have not been thoroughly studied. There are many reasons why preserving biodiversity is important. One reason to preserve biodiversity is that wild organisms and ecosystems are a source of beauty and recreation. In addition, biodiversity has both economic value and ecological value within an ecosystem. Many plants, animals, and other organisms are economically valuable for humans. These organisms provide people with food and supply raw materials for clothing, medicine, and other products. No one knows how many other useful species have not yet been identified. Ecosystems are economically valuable too. Many companies now run wildlife tours to rainforests, savannas, mountains, and other places. This ecosystem tourism, or ecotourism, is an important source of jobs and money for such nations as Brazil, Costa Rica, and Kenya. Hey, that reminds me of our social studies lesson from the other day, when we talked about the Amazon rainforest. They mentioned ecotourism there. All the species in an ecosystem are connected to one another. Species may depend on each other for food and shelter. A change that affects one species can affect all the others. Some species play a particularly important role in their ecosystem. A keystone species is a species that influences the survival of many other species in an ecosystem. Sea otters, as shown in Figure 2, are one example of a keystone species. So here we have our Figure 1. It says there are many more species of insects than plant or other animal species on Earth. We can see our insects are at 1 million, our plants at 324,800, and other animals at 331,000 even. It says what percentage of species shown on the pie graph do insects represent? Round your answer to the nearest tenth. Well, just by looking at it, we can see that insects take over more than half of the population. So we know our number is going to be more than 50%. Here's why. If we had it at 50%, we would know that would be straight down the middle here. So we know it's more than 50%. We also know that if we cut this whole thing into fourths, pretending my lines are super straight, that it's less than 75%. So we can guess it's probably about maybe 60%. My book actually says 60.4%, but we don't need to get super specific, I guess. What factors affect biodiversity? Biodiversity varies from place to place on Earth. Factors that affect biodiversity in an ecosystem include climate, area, niche diversity, genetic diversity, and extinction. The tropical rainforests of Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Central Africa are the most diverse ecosystems in the world. The reason for the great biodiversity in the tropics is not fully understood. Many scientists hypothesize that it has to do with climate. For example, tropical rainforests have fairly constant temperatures and large amounts of rainfall throughout the year. Many plants grow year-round. This continuous growing season means that food is always available for other organisms. Within an ecosystem, a large area will usually contain more species than a small area. For example, you would usually find more species in a 100 square meter area than in a 10 square meter area. Makes more sense. If there's more space, then there's going to be more organisms there. Did you know that? Rainforests cover only about 7% of the Earth's land surface, but they contain more than half the world's species, including the chimpanzee. Now you know! Alright, figure 3 says, we skip figure 2, that's going to be in your worksheet. A park manager has received 3 park plans. The dark green area represents the park. Number 1 says, circle the plan the manager should choose to support the most biodiversity. So we have 3 different areas. We have our first area, which is our circle, our second area, which is our big rectangle, and our third area, which is like a wonky diagonal size. If the manager is going to make the most out of our biodiversity, which one do you think they should choose? I'm gonna say this guy down here, our little rectangle, this guy here, probably the best bet. It looks like they have the more space in one area, and we know parks, you got more space if you spread out that way. Suppose that 15 square meters of the park could support 7 species of large mammals. About how many species could the park you circled support? So 15 square meters can support 7 species, so if we do some math, I'm making my calculator, Alright, math, okay, we're doing it. We square that, and then we times it by 7. Nope, wrong number, I didn't mean to do that. Whatever, 933 is our answer. Because math. Coral reefs are the second most diverse ecosystems in the world. Found only in shallow, warm waters, coral reefs are often called the rainforests of the sea. A coral reef supports many different niches. Recall that a niche is the role of an organism in its habitat, or how it makes its living. A coral reef enables a greater number of species to live in it than a more uniform habitat, such as a flat sandbar does. Diversity is very important within a species. The greatest genetic diversity exists among species of unicellular organisms. Organisms in a healthy population have diverse traits such as color and size. Genes are located within the cells and carry the hereditary information that determines an organism's traits. Organisms inherit genes from their parents. Recall, genes, spelled G-E-N-E-S, are not the same genes, spelled J-E-A-N-S, that you wear like pants. We are not talking about pants. We are talking about biology, not pants. The organisms in one species share many genes, not pants. But each organism also has some genes that differ from those of other individuals. Both the shared genes and the genes that differ among individuals make up the total gene pool of that species. Species that lack a diverse gene pool are less able to adapt and to survive changes in the environment.
Apply it!
New potato plants are created from pieces of the parent plant. So a potato crop has the same genetic makeup as the parent plant. In 1845, Ireland was struck by a potato famine. A rot-causing fungus destroyed the potato crops, which were an important part of the Irish diet. Many people died of starvation, and many more left the country to find food. Number 1 asks, how did a potato crop without a variety of different genes lead to the Irish potato famine of 1845? Well, we know, because we just read, the potato plant was created from pieces of their parent plant. So somebody planted potatoes, got those potatoes, and then because of those potatoes, they were able to create more potatoes. So there's not a variety of different genes in the potato, meaning that a fungus was easily able to worm its way inside and destroy the whole crop. Number 2 is a challenge question. What can farmers do to prevent another potato famine? Well, I guess farmers could increase the genetic diversity of their crops by planting different types of potatoes. And then maybe those potatoes can create different potatoes. The disappearance of all members of a species from Earth is called extinction. Extinction is a natural process that occurs when organisms do not adapt to changes in their environment. In the last few centuries, the number of species becoming extinct has increased dramatically. Once a population drops below a certain level, the species may not recover. People have directly caused the extinction of many species through habitat destruction, hunting, or other actions. Species in danger of becoming extinct in the near future are called endangered species. Species that could become endangered in the near future are called threatened species. Endangered and threatened species are found on every continent and in every ocean. So species that is starting to die out, so their death rate is higher than their birth rate, are threatened species. That means if we don't do something now, they're going to become endangered. And if we don't do anything, then they do become endangered, which means that it's really, really close to becoming extinct and we'll never have it again. Imagine if we had our dogs and something happened, a disease, we were killing them, something happened, and a bunch of dogs around the world died. We don't have many left, now they're threatened. They could become extinct if we don't do anything. And if we still don't do anything and more die, well, now they're endangered. That means soon we're not going to have any dogs left. And if we still don't do anything to try and help, eventually we will have no more dogs. So, hug your dog. Keep them safe. Large animals in figure 4 says, like the green sea turtle, are the most publicized endangered species. But did you know that insects and plants could also be endangered? Why do you think some endangered species get more attention than others? Well, perhaps we know more about certain creatures and species, like plants, insects, and other organisms, because of media exposure. We see a lot of times, we're always talking about sea turtles. But no one really is ever talking about the blackbird sphinx moth or the Hawaiian alula. So people might not know that insects and plants can be endangered or are endangered. How do humans affect biodiversity? Humans interact with their surroundings every day. The many choices people make impact the environment and affect species. Biodiversity can be negatively or positively affected by the actions of humans. A natural event such as a hurricane can damage an ecosystem, wiping out populations or even entire species. Human activities can also threaten biodiversity and cause extinction. These activities include habitat destruction, poaching, pollution, and the introduction of exotic species. The major cause of extinction is habitat destruction. the loss of a natural habitat. Clearing forests or filling in wetlands changes those ecosystems. Breaking larger habitats into smaller isolated pieces or fragments is called habitat fragmentation. See Figure 5. Some species may not survive such changes to their habitat. So let's take a peek at Figure 5 real quick. It says breaking habitats into pieces have negative effects on the species that live there. In the first diagram below, a road divides a habitat in two. On the second diagram, redraw the road so it divides the habitat's resources equally. Well, we can see in this picture here, our road is coming in like this. That means animals over here, here's my deer, can't access the water equally, so they're gonna have to cross the road and maybe get hit by a car trying to go get something to drink. So perhaps instead of drawing a road this way, we can draw, this is like a little bridge. Woo-hoo. And our road goes this way. So now a deer can be living over here, have access to water and access to shelter. And a deer can be over here, have access to water and access to shelter. Alright, the illegal killing or removal of wildlife from their habitats is called poaching. Some endangered species are valuable to poachers. Animals can be sold as pets or used to make jewelry, coats, belts, or shoes. Plants can be sold as houseplants or used to make medicine. Some species are endangered because of pollution. Pollution may reach animals through the water they drink, the air they may breathe, or the food they eat. Pollutants may kill or weaken animals or cause birth defects. Introducing exotic species into an ecosystem can threaten biodiversity. Exotic species can outcompete and damage native species. The gypsy moth was introduced into the United States in 1869 to increase silk production. Gypsy moth larvae have eaten the leaves off of millions of acres of trees in the northeastern United States. Some people who preserve biodiversity focus on protecting individual endangered species. Others try to protect entire ecosystems. Three methods of protecting biodiversity are captive breeding, laws and treaties, and habitat preservation. Captive breeding is the mating of animals in zoos or in wildlife preserves. Scientists care for the young and then release them into the wild. Much of the sandhill crane habitat in the United States have been destroyed. To help the population, some cranes have been taken into captivity. The young are raised and trained by volunteers to learn the correct behaviors, such as knowing how and where to migrate. They are then released into the wild. In the United States, the Endangered Species Act prohibits trade of products made from threatened or endangered species. This law also requires the development of plans to save endangered species. The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species is an international treaty that lists more than 800 threatened and endangered species that cannot be traded for profit or other reasons anywhere in the world. The most effective way to preserve biodiversity is to protect whole ecosystems. Protecting whole ecosystems saves endangered species, the species they depend upon, and those that depend upon them. Many countries have set aside wildlife habitats as parks and refuges. Today, there are about 7,000 nature parks, preserves, and refuges in the world. That is it for lesson 5 in chapter 3. Tomorrow will be another social studies lesson, and I will see you on Friday for our final lesson in our green book. See you then.